Hello, today is January 17th. I want to take a walk through the deck that I've been using lately. Right now I'm Legend 4, but I haven't really had too much trouble getting up through the Legend rank, so it should be king games when I just have the time to play a little more ranked duels online. So yeah, just going to walk through and kind of talk about the logic. This is Mekk Knights, who are used as a tier 1 right now, very, very common, so if you're familiar with the game and meta, should not be surprising at all, but if not, going to kind of walk through what I have, the whys behind it, and why it's so powerful. So going to walk through the cards here. I have two purples, I have one yellow, two blues, two indigos, one red, and two of the vanillas. We'll start off with the purples. A lot of decks play three of these. They are arguably the most powerful. It can be very good defensively, but it can also just kind of cycle cards to your hand on the field. Its special effect allows you to banish one monster and then bring it back at the beginning of your next standby phase. But in doing that, you can also draw a Mekk Knight card to your hand, so you can basically draw faster. But also, if a card is under attack or as kind of a target of an effect, you can banish it that way and protect it. So this is very, very powerful in itself. We'll go on to yellow. Um, Actually, one more thing with the purple, you do have a 2500 attack stat, which is pretty high. I like to play this deck with the Tie That Binds because you can have 4 cards in the field really easily, adding 400 attack points to each of them. There's a number of different characters that have the Tie That Binds, so if you're trying to level up pretty quickly, you can do it using that as well. There's a lot of different ways you can do Surprise Present, you can do Mekk Knights with Crowler. So there's a lot of flexibility with this deck with who you play it with as well, but this is my preference. Moving on, Yellow Star, only play one. The attack and defense stats are pretty good, but the special effect is not that helpful. By banishing one Mekk Knight from your graveyard, you can destroy a spell or trap in the column. As much as it is good to get rid of the back row of your opponent, you really actually need the back row because with any of these Mekk Knight cards, you are going to only be able to summon or special summon them when there's 2 cards already established in that column. So getting rid of one can work against you even if it's after it's already summoned. You can move these cards around in the field, or if this one is to be destroyed, you then can't summon to that column after. So there's situations where it's really good to have, and you want to destroy that card, or also if you're using something like a memory, which I'll get to after, and you have an opponent with a Dark Magician of an attack stat of 2500, this is a great card to bring onto the field for that. We'll go to Blue Sky next. Blue Sky is really, really good because when special summoning, you can bring a number of Mekk Knight cards, monsters, to your hand that equal the number of cards that your opponent has in that column. So you can have up to 3 if you have an extra monster zone plus monster plus spell or trap. Being able to bring 3 cards to your hand immediately is incredibly powerful, and you can get one of each different card that way because you can special summon one of each card per turn, basically to the extent of there's not even enough room on the field to fit them all, so a really good problem to have. I'm going to skip over Ibli for a second and go to Indigo. I really like Indigo for 2 reasons. So that attack stat 2400, or actually a number of reasons, more than 2. Attack stat 2400, same with the defense, so pretty high. Again, with Tie That Binds, you're looking at close to 2800. So really, really adds up quickly. The next reason is the special ability, I think, is really, really helpful. So if you only have one column with 2 cards where you can special summon, you can special summon Indigo first. Its special ability allows you to move it to any column. It doesn't have to have 2 cards already established. So you can use kind of one column that can special summon, but actually then bring in 2 cards with it. So really, really helpful with that. Now, one other reason that I really like it is because it's level 8. Pretty simple, but when you have in the extra deck a couple of the Galaxy Eyes cards that I do, they're going to require 2 level 8s to summon. A lot of decks, as I mentioned, played 3 purples, and then 1 indigo, but I played 2 indigos and 2 purples, and with that it makes a couple of more opportunities to get one of the Galaxy Eyes cards on the field. We'll walk through it after with the Galaxy Eyes, but obviously very, very powerful cards. Next, I'll move on to Red Moon. This attack stat fairly high, defense pretty high, but the special effect can be very timely. Similar to Yellow, where you can destroy one card in the same column that it is by banishing a Mekk Knight from your graveyard. Only big difference is that it has to be a face-up monster. You have to make sure it's face-up. If you try to use the effect when your opponent has a face-down, you're then going to only be able to destroy yourself. So pretty silly when it happens. This happened to all of us as we learn the deck, I'm sure, but key difference to keep in mind. But if your opponent has a very powerful monster in that column that even with Tide that Binds, you're not going to be able to destroy by attacking, you can use that effect, get it off the field, and if it's later in a duel where you already have a number of Mekk Knights in the graveyard, you can use the effect as many times as you want per turn. So if your opponent has 2 monsters in that column, then protection, you can use it 3 times and get rid of them both, per se. So really powerful. And then 2 of the vanilla Mekk Knights. Some people play 1. I'm playing 2 for a couple of reasons. 1, I find it is a good kind of defensive tactic or backup plan where you don't have 2 cards in any column and you need a backup and way to just get something in the field to protect yourself. You can do it that way. Or even if you do have columns with 2 cards in it and you have 1 more space to fill, obviously you can normal summon these cards and fill that spot and then use them to link summon, or just 1 more attacker. Kind of one of the trade-offs with this deck sometimes is you have a lot of cards in the field and not like a ton of attack power, like you're not talking about 4,000 attack points by any means, but still powerful because you have other ways to get cards off the field and things like that. So strength in numbers, and it's 1 more way to work at that, especially with some of the monsters we have in the extra deck are going to be link summoned. Let me jump back to Ibli here. Ibli was released very recently and has taken the place of a lot of the synchros with this deck. Some people play 3 Iblis. I think 2 is enough, but very, very powerful, especially first turn. If you're looking, let's say I have a blue and an Ibli both in my hand, I'm going to summon Ibli. I'm then going to link summon here with Link Discipline, a Link 1. I actually have 2 of them, and also in Imduk there. So when I link summon the Link Discipline there, I'm going to have the special ability of Ibli activated. I can move that Link Discipline to my opponent's side of the field, and I can put it in the same column as the Link Discipline, and then right away I have 2 cards established in a column, and then I can start special summoning the Mekk Knight. So the blue could come there. If I had an Indigo, I would put the Indigo first, move it to another column, bring the blue, then I can bring 2 other Mekk Knights to my hand, and you see how this is working. I'm already establishing a really strong field. So very, very powerful. The other thing is when it's on your opponent's side of the field, your opponent can't special summon. Now, I think most people kind of legend level are familiar with this, and they're going to have a Link 1 in their extra deck that they can just get it off the field with. But if someone is not prepared, it can be dual ending, essentially, where so many decks today are going to be reliant on special summoning, and if, they can't get it off the field, they're in trouble. So sometimes I'll intentionally leave it on the field instead of destroying it for that reason. And we'll move on. MST, need I say more? Just an incredible card. I have 2 Book of Moons. You could play 3, a little bit of flexibility here, but I'm trying to keep... I have 22 cards in the deck. Could obviously play down to 20. Just a little bit of preference there. World Legacy's Memory. I mentioned this card earlier. It very, very powerful. It's a quick play. I usually put it as a face down, and I'm not going to activate it until my opponent's turn. And I'll activate it when I have, let's say, no monsters in the field. So they go for a direct attack with a monster with 2,000. I'll often bring out purple. They can't destroy it if it also has 2,000. And then at the end of my turn, I can activate its special or purple special effect. I can banish it to draw another card. And then right as it goes from their end phase to my normal phase, purple comes back to the field, and I also have drawn that card already. Now, you can use it at any time, like if you need to get another card out, but because it's brought out in defense mode, it's not like you can bring out another attacker. And if you don't banish the card, it just returns to your turn at the end of, or returns to your hand at the end of the field. So one thing to keep in mind, you kind of have to learn how to work with the card best, but like I mentioned, using it at the end of your opponent's turn is really, really effective because they can't take advantage of the card not being on the field after it returns to your hand, and also especially again with purple. So World Legacy Secret, this is a 1 limited and for really good reason. You can search this card out with a card that I'll show in just a minute here, but basically when You activate it, you can target one level 5 or higher monster in your graveyard and summon it. So cool summoning, that's not enough to get limited. The really powerful part is anytime that you have a monster, a Mekk Knight monster in a column, your opponent can't activate a monster effect in that same column. So that's borderline broken, in my opinion. Monster effects are probably the most powerful part of this game right now. So if you can stop your opponent from using that, it's really powerful. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of strength in numbers where you can get at least one card in each column very, very simply. Now, I've had some duels that were totally changed also in conjunction with this, with Indigo. Because your opponent activates an effect, you activate Indigo's effect, you move Indigo or a different Mekk Knight into the same column as that monster activating the effect. When you have World Legacy Secret activated already, because it's continuous, and that card is zapped and can't activate the effect. So you can basically just move Indigo or another monster around, even if you don't have a monster in each column, to just continually zap their effects. It does not destroy them, but stopping the effect in itself is enough to just render a lot of their stuff useless and change the duel, because they can't special summon. If they have Ibli, they can't use effects here, and you're just stopping them in their tracks. So the last 3 traps are going to be defensive, Crackdown, where I can take your card, bring it to my side of the field. Can't attack, but still, it really, if they have a Blue Eyes out, and taking one of the most powerful cards is going to be very, very painful. Evacuation Device, 2 of these, just to bring something back to their hand. If they have a Link 4 out and don't have protection for it, this is going to stop their whole kind of chain of momentum. Really, really big turnaround. And let me jump then to the extra deck. I have all 3 Galaxy Eyes monsters in here. So the Armor Photon Dragon. Actually, we'll start here with the Cypher Dragon. Just the typical chain with all 3 of these monsters. So I can take control of one of theirs, I can destroy one, and I can destroy one. Pretty flexible because I have 2 purples and 2 indigos that are very easy to search out and very easy to bring out. I will say there's a time and a place for these where, of course, it's really great to always bring them out, but because we have protection through other cards in the deck, the Mekk Knight archetype is protected by this theme, but cards like the Galaxy Eyes are not. So time and a place again where you need to understand the trade-off of them. And then the other really big core part of this deck is the Morningstar. So Morningstar is a link to, as I mentioned before, if I put Ibli out, I link summon Link Discipline, and then I can then already bring out Morningstar and start to kind of build based off of that. Now, really unique effect, right? Because we have Legacy Secret where they can't activate effects, but with Morningstar, they can't destroy a Mekk Knight monster that's in a different column. So if they attack one, can't destroy it and no battle damage. Now, if I put Ibli in front of this after it's summoned, nothing can be summoned in that column unless they, get Ibli off the field. So it's already protected in a sense. If I think about Indigo, I can move Morningstar around so things can't be destroyed. There's a ton of protection built into these cards in the way that they can interact with each other incredibly well. So again, if I have Morningstar set up and I have Legacy Secret set up, card effects are not going to be powerful, and then you can't beat me by battle. So you're going to have to find a way to use spells or traps. There is actually a World Legacy Star that does prevent traps from being activated, but traps are just not powerful enough to take cards or space for that right now in this deck. I'm sure there's some people that play variations of it. Totally your choice there, but I don't find it necessary, and I've been doing pretty well like this. So going to the last couple ones here, Nightmare Phoenix, obviously incredibly popular card right now. Link 2, and can destroy a spell or trap on the field by just discarding one card. Nightmare Unicorn is another option for this deck. I don't use it only because I find it as a Link 3 really hard to bring out, and then I don't always have a ton of cards in my hand because of how quickly you can get your entire field set up. So sometimes I find the trade-off of having to discard more than it's worth it, compared to just keeping that card in the hand and letting it get in the field a little bit easier that way. So Nightmare Phoenix, good to have in the back pocket. If I could have more cards in the extra deck, then I would, but this isn't, this is a good setup for me right now. Imduk, the only thing to keep in mind is it requires a normal monster to be summoned. So the only normal monsters that we have are the vanilla Mekk Knights here. I would use that's the only way that it can be used. Now, Imduk itself is not that powerful, but being able to destroy the monster that it directly points to, and hopefully you can summon to either extra monster zone and use that effect. Good to have in the back pocket. This is more of an emergency or kind of rescue, but nice to have. And then I actually have 2 Link Disciplines. Again, one of these could probably be swapped out for a Nightmare Unicorn or I don't know, any other card of your preference. I've seen these decks set up a number of different ways. But I like to have one because in case I use Ibli, but then let's say my opponent uses Ibli too, I can sacrifice, like if my opponent puts Ibli out there if I have a blue knight. But if I have something like a purple, a yellow, an indigo, a red, those are going to require 2 sacrifices to bring out. I may not have that, so I would rather just keep 2 as an emergency play because of how common Ibli is right now. So that's the entire deck. I'm going to post some plays from it, hopefully get up to King of Games in the next few days and put this on the channel as well. But I figured I'd do a walkthrough. Not a very unique deck right now. Wish it could be a little more exciting, but I do like it in the sense where there's a level of creativity that you can play with this deck with, and the fact that it does take actual strategization, it does take understanding of the deck to play well with it, because if you don't and you just start to try to bring cards out, you're really not going to get anywhere. But it's also very easy to see why it is tier 1. So look out for more content soon.